I learned a really important lesson from one of my mentors early on that completely changed how I approached the rest of my career as a filmmaker. So I wanted to share that with you in this video, and hopefully it could have a similar impact for you as well. So when I was first starting out, I would literally say yes to everything. If I was available on that day, I would take on the job. It didn't matter what the job was. I would do a wedding shoot. The next day I might do a short film. I literally, when I shot high school hockey games, if someone asked me, which they did, I would go shoot it. And I would even say yes if they didn't want me to shoot it and they wanted help as a grip. Or even sometimes as a production assistant, I was getting coffee. I would just say yes. I didn't care what the job was. And that would be probably the first 2 or 3 years of me doing this. And I didn't even care about how much they paid. That was really not even my goal at the time. It was just working, basically. Then I got a call one time from one of my mentors, and he was a pretty successful DP at the time. And he called and said, hey, I got a bone to pick with you. I didn't really even know what that expression meant at the time, but it didn't sound good. I knew there was something wrong based on some of the previous jobs I had with him. Probably I did something wrong and he wanted to tell me about it. So he said, I just heard from this producer that you just took on a job for $300 and shot it. And I wasn't saying no to anything, right? So that made sense. I was like, yeah. So I said, that's what the rate they had for me. I didn't tell them what my rate was. They just told me that was the rate. Then he said something that I would never forget. He said, if you take on every project at every rate, that will completely destroy our industry. And really looking back now, that's exactly what ended up happening. Every single year, it just kept getting worse and worse, and the direction just kept going down to the bottom of the barrel. So I asked him, well, what do I do instead? He said, well, say no. And I was kind of like shocked. I was like, what do you mean say no? Like, don't take on the job? That was sort of foreign to me. The only time I said no is if I was booked that day for another job. Literally, people would text or call or email and say, are you available? I wouldn't ask what the job is, how much you paid, what did you want me to do? I would just look at my calendar. Am I available? Yes. Okay, so that really wasn't the best approach from what I learned. He said, it's perfectly fine to do everything for maybe a couple of years and see what you like, build up your skill set, see what you don't like. But after that, you got to choose your direction, what you really want to do down the line, and you really should set what's called a minimum rate. What's the lowest amount of money you would take on per day based on your skill set? And I knew at that time I had built up quite a bit of skills. My reel was pretty good 2-3 years into this, and I had learned a lot. So I knew I should have raised my rate at that point and shouldn't have taken jobs at that lower tier. So I asked him what he thought I should charge. I had no idea at the time. So he said, the minimum rate you should charge as a shooter, as a camera operator at the time, was $500. And remember, this is a long time ago. This is over 10 years ago. And then he said, stop taking other gigs where you're not shooting if that's your goal. So my goal at that time was to be a director of photography. And I remember thinking, well, I can't do that. I will lose like most of my clients. They don't really, a lot of them don't hire me as a shooter. A lot of them won't pay $500. I'm gonna make way less money. But I looked at where he was and I was like, well, I wanna be where he is. So why would I just do what I think is right? Maybe I should just listen to him. And I wasn't doing all that well anyway, right? I was working a ton, but I wasn't making much money because I would take on anything, right? Sometimes $200, $300 jobs. I would have had to work like 200 days to even make a normal salary by the time it was said and done, and I was buying a ton of gear too, right? So I figured, what am I gonna lose? I should give it a shot. So in the next few months, what I did was I started saying no a lot more than I said yes. And I remember to this day, the first few times I said no, even though the date on my calendar was wide open, I thought about it for like 3 days. I was like, why did I do that? That's crazy. And I ended up working a lot less, and it felt really, really strange. Every time someone would ask me for a job, any job, I would look at my calendar, I would be open, I would be inclined to say yes, and then I thought about this and I was like, no, sorry, I'm not available, I would say. Even though I was, but I didn't want to take those kind of jobs, right? Like I didn't want to be a grip. I knew that. I didn't want to be a production assistant. I felt like I graduated from that. So I knew if it wasn't a director of photography job that where I was behind the camera, even if it was a camera operator job and I learned from another DP, I would only take those, and I didn't take anything else at the time. And I also knew if I wanted to make enough money, I had to charge a minimum of $500 for my labor, for my day rates. And here in Chicago, we work on typically a 10-hour day rate. Sometimes back then I was working on a 12-hour day rate, but that would be my day rate, right? We charge based on our day rate at $500 then. And I then started to realize, yeah, people that are doing the same thing around my skill set are charging that much. Why am I undercutting everyone else, right, to try to get the job? I should basically try to get the job based on the skill set I have and based on the merit and based on people wanting to work with me. I shouldn't just undercut based on price. And this set me up actually after a few months to actually make a normal living that year without working a crazy number of hours. Now, it definitely didn't set me out to be wealthy, right? It was just getting me to a point where I could make a normal salary without having to work, 2,500 hours a year, right? Most people were working like crazy hours, especially early on. I was getting on shows and things like that, and the hours were brutal. But by changing my rate, by changing how many different types of jobs I could make, it really helped me create that transition for myself. And then that transition led to another transition a couple years later where I was able to create my own video production companies that I've covered in other videos. But really, the lesson that I took away from this that hopefully resonates here is I learned that if I said yes to everything, it was okay for a little while. It helped me gain skills. It helped me see what I like to do, what I don't like to do. But then at some point, you have to pause. And then you have to start saying no so you could go down the path that you designed for yourself. If you don't have a path, if you don't know where you're going, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult because you'll just be in this kind of a loop of always saying yes based on availability and not based on going down the path that you've designed for yourself. Again, early on, the path was director of photography. Let me go down this path. What are the things that are coming in my way? Well, all the different jobs, gripping, PAing, they were coming in my way. Taking on low jobs at a low rate was taking away from me pursuing that path. Why? Because I had to do more, right? I had to do more days. Instead of doing 2 days for 250 hours a day, now I could do one for 500. And then that kept going up and up and up till I got to a point where I didn't have to work many days at all to make a normal salary. So I hope you found this useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and I'll catch you next week.